Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's Inside the Force. Dave Cottingham here with Casey Cooley.
Hello, everybody.
And Cody Geiler.
Hey, hey.
What's happening, guys?
Not a whole lot.
Right.
Except for a lot of Star Wars stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of Star Wars stuff. Yes. We do have a lot of news to get into. You know, I'm looking at our website right now, and I usually mention this. I haven't the last couple of weeks, but we have a Star Wars Celebration countdown on there that's still going. I don't know if it's happening or not, but
still looking good right now, I guess.
I don't know. I think
you
it's
still celebrate that day.
Yeah. Well, Comic-Con's having a virtual thing now, so.
Yeah. Who's it? Comic-Con's doing a virtual thing? Yeah, right? But is that in
Comic-Con
July or is it kind of later? Is it happening in July?
I don't know date. I haven't heard any more details besides they're just doing something.
Yeah, I figured we'd hear something about Celebration now at some point because I think people got to start making some plans. You know, if they. I mean, I have Disney Vacation booked still in June, and they haven't told us anything yet. So I don't know. That's a whole nother conversation. But thanks everybody for joining us. I hope everybody's been having a good start to the week. Last time we recorded, we put an episode out right before Star Wars Day. So how was everybody's Star Wars Day, Cody? I mean, we talked on most of it, but what'd you end up doing celebrating?
It was pretty good. I watched a little bit of. Well, I obviously watched the Mando documentary episode 1. Watched the Clone Wars finale, so that was a good sort of double feature. And then after I put my son to sleep later that night, my wife surprised me with some blue milk, and we had kind of made plans to watch Rise of Skywalker because she actually hadn't seen it yet. Which is crazy. Yeah, she just hadn't got to watching it, so we watched it together, and it was fun. She liked it. At the end, she was like, "What happened to Ben?" I'm like, "I still don't know." And then we had to have a long discussion. I'm sure she loved that. But yeah, it was fun. She guessed the line that Rey does at the very end, right before she gets the other saber. When Palpatine's like, "I am all the Sith," and she was like, "She's gonna say I'm all the Jedi," and I was like, "What?"
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, it was fun. And then I got a late edition. I got the Baby Yoda plush.
Creep it in there.
Little gift to myself.
Case?
But yeah, besides Clone Wars and the gallery premiere, I feel like I did most of my Star Wars leading up to the day. Like the whole weekend was nothing but kind of trying to watch as much as I can. But the day of, it was pretty much Clone Wars and the galleries.
Yeah, I was, I was the night before leading up to Star Wars Day. You know, the company we all work for, we were putting out a Star Wars Day video, and I was helping edit that, and so I was up real late doing that. But I wanted to, we as a group here, Casey and I, we kicked off our council sessions that are out there now with a couple videos, so I was putting those together also. But I think the day of, it was weird because I woke up and I was like, I'm totally in the mood, Star Wars, no matter what. So, I'm fortunate that I have several TVs in the house here. So on my bedroom TV, I had the prequels running. My kitchen TV, I had the original trilogy running, and then in the basement, I had the sequel trilogy running. So I had, 1, 4, and 7 started, and then after each one ended, I'd play. So as I was walking around the house, I would always see Star Wars going.
Hear it and see it.
You see it, hear it, and then it's funny because I caught my daughter Sam, my oldest 10. She would walk into a room and sit down and start watching, and then she'd walk into the bedroom, and then she'd start watching. So it was really cool to just have it hearing and playing as I was going through. And then, of course, that night, once, that I started those about, late morning or whatever, and then they all wrapped up by dinner time. So then I sat down at the end of the night and was like, you know what, I'm going to watch what is pretty much my favorite Star Wars film right now, which is Rogue One. So I watched Rogue One again, which, man, I freaking love it. I just think the music too. I got the soundtrack on my phone. I occasionally play it. I mean, it's so good. Like you, I got a late edition, Cody. Also, mine came this past weekend too. I got the Pop Child, the Pop. So
cute.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it was Star Wars. The girls had Star Wars shirts on, and we messed around with the lightsabers and all that stuff. So it's, of course, so many people put out things. You're on social media, on Twitter. Everybody's wishing everybody. It's become such a global holiday. I mean, Star Wars Day was trending, and I mean it's really grown. You sometimes still have to make your way through all the hatred and all that stuff that's kind of out there. But, man, that day, it's just so positive. It's really good and refreshing. So hope everybody had a good Star Wars Day, and that continues on as all of this news starts rolling out. It started with Star Wars Day. I think that's when the Taika Waititi story dropped, right? It was on Star Wars Day. We are going to bust through a bunch of news and some rumors here, but the confirmed stuff right now is a new Star Wars feature film theatrical release will be co-written by Taika Waititi and Oscar Award nominee Krysty Wilson Cairns, who co-wrote 1917 and Last Night in Soho. She will be helping Taika write the film, which Taika will be directing. Now, there is no release date for this film. Are we under the assumption that this is the film scheduled for December 2022?
As of now, yeah.
I would think so, but I don't know. I was looking at Taika's IMDb when the news dropped. I knew about him, but I was like, oh, what's I know he's working on Thor: Love and Thunder. It comes out February 2022.
Oh, wow.
So dude's going to be directing two huge blockbusters that are, different release times, but with the restrictions of COVID and stuff, you got to wonder if that's going to be possible. I don't know.
I mean, like that would overlap. Like his time on those films would overlap. So that's strange.
Both Disney things, so they'll work together, I guess. But
yeah, I don't know if he could shoot Thor, and then as that starts post, he can shoot Star Wars, and then I don't know. That'd be very difficult. Unless he's not the one doing that, he's doing the one in 2024. In 2022 could be somebody else, or that could be Rian Johnson's that we could hear still. I don't know. But that would mean they're probably not together. They're different movies then, not part of the trilogy, because they got the release dates for, right, 2022, 24, 26. Who knows?
It could all be pushed too. Who knows?
Yeah. So, not sure what, obviously there's no direction on what he's making, but other part of the news that was in that same article is, of course, full confirmation about Emmy-nominated writer Leslie Heeland, who is best known for her work with Russian Doll. She is currently developing a new untitled Star Wars series for Disney+. She is going to write, executive produce, and be the showrunner for the series. That is confirmed as well. That was an article that came out and broke earlier that week. But two big full confirmations now. So that is the third. It's the fourth overall Disney Plus series, if you count the Clone Wars coming back. But the third, the fourth live action series and the fifth series overall. So as long as Obi-Wan and Cassian still see the light of day, which is still to be determined, I guess.
Hope so.
But yeah, anything? Any speculation on what do you think this series is going to be?
I mean, I like to hop on the bandwagon that everybody else is saying. I think hoping that it's an Ahsoka show, that'd be pretty sweet. But you hear Ahsoka, you hear Afra. Those are really the two big ones, and I mean, either one of those would be fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just hearing Filoni talk about how they take characters and try them in other mediums. He mentioned how they did that with Ahsoka after Clone Wars and Rebels. They did, or in between, they did the novel.
Right.
Right.
And so that really leads you to believe that the rumor that's out there that she's going to be in the Mandalorian live action is happening. Now with Afra, they're doing that audio drama. So I feel like Lucasfilm may even have a little bit of they try a character in one medium, see if they can make it in another medium, and if they're actually popular, then maybe they'll actually put them in something in live action. But I don't know if it would be, if that trajectory would line up with her series, if she's already working on writing it, if they're still testing out whether or not people are actually interested in Afra outside of the comic.
Yeah. Speaking of, which is kind of what I think they're doing with the High Republic. I think they're going to see how that does with the literature side of it, to see whether or not they actually make movies or TV series based on that kind of stuff. Because I think it's popular. You got to go that route and give people some live action of that. So I will predict what I think is going to happen is kind of leads us into this next news, which is kind of rumored based right now, nothing confirmed from Lucasfilm, but we have heard for weeks now about the casting of Rosario Dawson possibly for the live action Ahsoka, who is supposed to be showing up in season 2 of The Mandalorian, as well as possibly getting her own spinoff series, like you just mentioned. That could be this series from Leslie Headland. I do think now that the rumors we're also hearing of a casting of Sabine Wren in The Mandalorian season 2 as well. And what I'm hearing or reading too is that Ahsoka and Sabine are going to be together in one episode of The Mandalorian, which would then kick them off and lead them to what is dubbed, what I'm seeing right now is dubbed as the kind of sequel series to Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is what I think she's possibly working on, is that series, which I think will, and I know it says executive produced, which kind of, I think it's going to be co-executive produced also by Filoni. I don't think there's any way he would hand those characters off to anybody.
Yeah, that's the only reason I would say that wouldn't happen is if Filoni's not involved, then would that story just be animation? But I love the thought. I love the idea.
I think Filoni, and we kind of texted about this, Casey, over the weekend. I think you're right. I think they're setting up big things for Filoni. I think he's going to be running a lot more creative on stuff like that. Is that where you're at, Case?
Yeah, it's definitely feels like they're prepping him, like they're putting him in the public eye more to get the mainstream Star Wars fan used to him, used to his name and his face, because he's gotten so many interviews now, just with the Clone Wars, and so it definitely feels like they're kind of shifting the tides, at least for him in a way. I don't know if he's got a good publicist, if it's just Disney PR is doing a good job, but he's definitely getting a lot of success kind of in the mainstream realm.
Well, I mean, you got to think it makes sense because, I mean, just think back to the last year with Rise of Skywalker, Mandalorian, and the Clone Wars. It's like you could probably make the argument that Clone Wars and Mandalorian have been received a lot better than the Rise of Skywalker and ultimately the sequel trilogy, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, Filoni being kind of and Favreau has a big part of that too. I think Favreau is, I think the both of them together could be, co-creatives in a way to lead Lucasfilm. And I think both of them are big enough fans that they would. But, Yeah, you got to think that they are going to play a part in anything and everything that's at least on Disney Plus. Maybe not in the films, but at least Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Well, we've kind of scrutinized occasionally some of the firings of creatives and directors, and I think now with The Mandalorian, and we see it in some of the Disney Gallery, is, like you said, Favreau Filoni are this team of really experienced in live action and Disney blockbuster with Favreau, and then Filoni with his Star Wars experience from George, and then now they're bringing in other directors, young directors like Taika, who's now into the fold with making a new Star Wars movie. So it really feels like they may finally be putting together this team of creative people that can all work together, and all the stories they're telling will have a little more maybe cohesion.
Yeah, very much so. I thought and kind of just piggybacking what you just said about the gallery episode, episode 1 that dropped on Star Wars Day, very interesting. It was about the directors, and very interesting. I don't know if you guys felt like this, but such a unique collection and diverse collection of directors. If you sit down, if you just happen to just sit down, just like as a spectator, and kind of just sat right there, a part of that table, and heard everybody's stories like that. I mean, my first thought, I was just so blown away by the paths each of them took to get into that seat to direct an episode of The Mandalorian, because, for one, none of them have Star Wars really backgrounds. I think Bryce Dallas Howard might have the closest, just because she's Ron Howard's daughter, and he directed Solo and knows George really well. But you hear Deborah's, and you hear especially Taika's, and Taika especially, like coming from like a comedy background, and he's such a weird guy, a fun guy, but it's crazy how I don't know. I wonder what you guys thought about just how diverse that group is, and then we're kind of getting into that new group of directors that we're seeing for season 2.
Yeah, I mean, I loved the gallery series is great, and like you mentioned, they all come from different places. You got Rick Famuyiwa, who was an indie, mostly feature film director. And you got Deborah Chow, who is probably the seasoned veteran in TV because she worked on some of the Marvel series.
That's right.
And then, you've got Filoni, who's comes from animation. And then, like you said, Taika, who, was kind of not on the map a couple years ago doing indie film and acting in theater. He said nobody would cast him. So him and his friend just made their own stuff. But then, somehow he got Thor Ragnarok and killed it on that. So... But the cool connection, and I think Filoni talked a lot about it, was, Star Wars being about family in that first episode. But then all these people, and, even Bryce Dallas Howard talked about when they first saw Star Wars and they fell in love with it. And it's really, a lot of it's maybe a little bit of PR for them, but it does strike true to us as fans to see a lot of these people are around the same age.
Yeah.
Category. I mean, Favreau, a little older than the rest, but, it's really cool to see them all talk about how a lot of the technology of seeing Star Wars led them to filmmaking or wanting to make movies or, push the boundaries of technology. And then they're now getting to use cutting edge technology and using their different backgrounds to, bring a really action packed episode like 3, and then Taika having that open with the 2 stormtroopers just bantering and comedy, and you see how these different genres and takes can play together, and maybe only works in TV on Disney Plus. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I liked how I mean, even though it doesn't quite feel as risky, like the show took a lot of risks. I mean, for one, it's the first live action show, but bringing in such a unique talent was risky, especially with Bryce Dallas Howard, and she's done a lot of directing outside of television, scripted television. She's done a lot of short films and some documentary stuff, but I loved how they focused on how much of a novice she was or is, and then just seeing all the behind the scenes stuff. It's just no wonder they chose her because she seems to work great behind the camera. And I loved how they made fun of her almost by giving her the hardest episode, they said. And
Yeah.
it was cool. It was just really, it was just very, like the way they did each vignette of each director, it was really inspiring creatively. And it was like a lot of fun to see, to see how it all came together. And I was just surprised at how it seemed like they were all together throughout the entire season. Like there were there was many different shots, behind the scenes clips of them on set together, and it looked like in completely different episodes. So couldn't watch it in detail enough to see if it truly was different episodes, but it was great to see like they seemed like to work as a team for pretty much the entire season, and it shows. I think it truly shows the unity of that first season is, it kind of all works. So it's good. They're Filoni and Favreau and Kathleen Kennedy had a say in it too. Though they're a great trio of people to bring these directors together.
Yeah, and that's kind of the big point I was going to make too. Is when you have a series like this, 8 episodes, I think, right? Was it 8 episodes? Mm-hmm. When you have 8 episodes like that and different directors, you almost are surprised that somebody or one of them, or maybe maybe a person that they wanted and didn't end up doing it. It's hard to fathom that somebody didn't want to, take control of the entire series, right? When you come into something like this, I mean, you're basically, the story is one big movie in a sense, right? You're just kind of breaking it into 8 different chapters, and surprise. I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't be, but I was a little surprised how that one person wasn't tasked to kind of take the whole vision of the whole thing, but to be given these people, especially some of these that haven't, like you mentioned, that haven't done this before, the opportunity to step in and direct the first live action Star Wars series is pretty risky in a sense. Mm-hmm. But I think it has worked out, and I think mainly because they are led by someone like Favreau, who's done a ton of projects, and of course, like someone like Filoni, who's knows Star Wars better than anybody these days.
Mm. Yeah, I think Star Wars as a television show, live action, works very well because of that uniqueness in the style of each episode. Because that's, from what I read, that's pretty much how the original trilogy. That's why they had different directors for each of those movies. They wanted each film kind of to feel like it had its own signature. Mm-hmm. And it worked. So I think that works great for a television show as well, especially when you have a team of people kind of working on it. Now, we'll see how it works, because Deborah Cho has the Obi-Wan show, right?
Right. So by herself, apparently.
Yeah. As of now, it seems like it's all her, which is great and cool. But I wonder who else is going to be part of that team of producers, EPs and writers and all that stuff to kind of bring that uniqueness to it. But I think Star Wars is I think the live action show is very fitting for Star Wars, and it's just surprising that it's taken this long to get there. And now we're getting 4, like three more shows. So it's like, it works. Let's just keep doing it.
On top of that, let's get into real fast the second episode of Disney Gallery, which was kind of about. It was called. I think it was called Legacy, right? It was talking about the legacy of Star Wars, and a lot of it had to do with George, and again, the background of some of these filmmakers and special effects artists, and Kathleen Kennedy was on there and whatnot. I know, Casey, you haven't really seen all of it yet, but the big thing I think that everybody was talking about was the last, 7-8 minutes that Filoni just kind of goes off on episode 1 and the significance of the lightsaber fight between Maul against Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. And in case you got to see it, you'll definitely watch it. But I think, Cody, we could talk about really how you reacted to that speech in a sense, because my first reaction to it was I was blown away, for one. I kind of thought of some of those things, but some of them I didn't. And honestly, my first kind of reaction after I, picked my jaw up a little bit was I was surprised how much the other filmmakers, because he was sitting around the table with the other directors, how much they were so drawn. You could tell how much they were drawn in because they had never thought of it like that, ever. They had never probably thought of episode 1 or that scene or the music or the situation that led to the entire prequels. I mean, I think they all were fans now. They all had become fans of episode 1 especially. And, of course, obviously more so of George Lucas. So, I don't know, Cody, what were your initial reactions to that?
Well, it's just really cool to see like something that's Disney Star Wars released that's talking about the prequels in a good way. I think it's a breath of fresh air for a lot of us. I grew up with the prequels, as well as watching the original trilogy. I got my episode 2 cup here. My mom was digging out stuff and found it. So, no, I think it was really cool. I think Deborah Chow at the very end, after him going on a soapbox, was like, "Oh yeah, I actually learned something just now." You're totally right that they were all like kind of leaning in like we were at home. But it was cool how he talked about Duel of the Fates. Even the title of that track, it's iconic and we love it. It's the sort of Darth Maul theme and anthem. But this idea of the fate and the fated arc being really tied to Anakin. He wasn't even in that sequence in that fight, but that fight meant so much to Anakin's trajectory. And then Filoni kind of goes on to talk about, how at that moment when he loses Qui-Gon, Qui-Gon's the one that found him and wanted to train him. Qui-Gon was going to kind of step in and be a father figure to Anakin that he never had.
Yes.
And he lost that opportunity. And then Obi-Wan did it out of obligation, and then they kind of became close. But Filoni likened it to like a brother. So he's always bringing back these family ties. Mm-hmm. But Anakin still never had that father figure.
That's right.
And, then he obviously goes down, the dark side. And then it takes you all the way to 6. And he kind of fast forward it where you see that Anakin is given this choice when Luke chooses love. I think he goes on to say, like Luke chooses family over, becoming a Sith, the controlling the galaxy. And it's just really cool to see that one moment in episode 1, one thing happened with Qui-Gon, changed Anakin's whole trajectory, but then he was given the second chance to become the father that he never had. And I think that moment when Filoni sort of got that point, and you're just like, this really is all about family. It's just these family connections.
And it's all about Anakin.
And Anakin and the lack of family and what he didn't have. And then him ultimately, making the right choice, which is that hopeful, inspiring thing. And, it's just like, it just recontextualizes it. The same way the Clone Wars does, but, in a different way.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. I'm with you. And the way the way he described it, of course, I was talking to somebody else today, and they were mentioning how, what Filoni was saying, they wished that George in an interview or somehow had explained that, or, back, over the years. But, George was never, he did have his explanations of some things, but you're right. He never probably went deep into the full, story and underlining tones that he was portraying in these films. But when you're Filoni and you're working side by side by this guy for 10 years, of course you're going to get this information and you're going to learn about these things. So I just imagined while he was sitting there talking to him, I'm like, that's George talking. It's George. It's from George's mind. Filoni didn't just make this up. This was a conversation he must have had. And I've heard several celebrities, Kevin Smith being one of them. I've heard several celebrities say that they had a conversation with Dave Filoni about the prequels, and now they have a different view about the prequels. And this is what I think they're talking about. I think this explanation, they finally got it on camera, and they finally got Filoni to discuss what he had always believed and what George had always been doing about this thing. So I think this turned a lot of people's minds. In fact, I liked this tweet that from Ahmad Best I wanted to put out here. Someone tweeted out, said Dave Filoni on why Qui-Gon Jinn and Duel of the Fates is so important. So there was a scene from Gallery, and Ahmad Best kind of commented on that tweet and just said, George once said to me 20 years ago that in time, people's opinions of this movie will change. Thanks to storytellers like Dave Filoni, we are now in time. and it's true. It's you can kind of see that. I think the reactions to and the meanings of the prequels are really starting to come up now. And I agree with you, Cody. I think that it's up to Disney to still push that series, that era of Star Wars onto us and put out stories around those characters still. I think they did a great job putting out Master and Apprentice, putting out the Queen's Peril that's coming, Queen's Shadow, and of course redoing the final season of the Clone Wars. I think all of this is just starting to elevate and open people's perceptions a little bit more about the prequels. I know it does mine. I mean, I've always been a fan of the prequels, but Cody, I kind of said this to you, Casey, before you came on. I mean, the seesaw of the prequels and the sequel trilogy is actually going the other way for me. And Clone Wars is really a big proponent of that, but this conversation of Filoni is really does help as well. So I'm excited for whatever we're going to get around that time era. Hopefully we get more, and hopefully these characters we see still live on a little bit. Anything else you guys want to say anything about that gallery wise?
I'm really looking forward to the technology one, because so far they keep showing these behind the scenes clips.
Oh
of that LED screen, or if it's LED, I think, right, Cody? Is it LED technically?
Yeah, it's like LED crystals that they have to grow over 5 years or something in a cave on what's the planet where they get the Kyber crystals? Yeah, Elam. That's where they go to get them.
It's good.
They are actual crystals.
So yeah, I mean, I'm just blown away, and I'm pausing it on the behind the scenes shots so many times, just because I don't catch I never catch that it's fake. I don't, because the sunset shot of Fennec Shan getting shot. And the clip is just those two actors just talking to each other, but it's you can see the roof of the dome that they're in. It's the practical of the speeder and the sand and 10 feet from the actors, and then it's just the screen. I'm just blown away. I'm blown away by it. It's crazy cool.
Yeah, I love it. Extending on that notion of Anakin, that is another casting rumor that's out there, is that Hayden Christensen is returning to reprise his role as Anakin Skywalker. Now, there's no confirmation of what and how many or whatever, but you got to feel like this is part of the Obi-Wan series, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, I don't see where else he would pop up.
Well, I always think let's see, because we got Obi-Wan, we got Cassian, and you got this third thing, this third show now, but because he could, if it was Cassian, he could easily be basically what Rogue One should have done is when we see Vader out of his costume and we see Hayden's face, and maybe it is Hayden in the costume other times if Vader pops up in Cassian.
Oh, yeah.
So something like that it could be the same thing for Obi-Wan.
Yeah, I'd love to see. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'd love to see flashbacks, of just Obi-Wan and Anakin, whether it's Clone Wars era. I think they can both still kind of pull off that look age-wise.
Yeah. I think that's what it's going to be. I think that's going to lend so much to Obi-Wan's character if he's still haunted by the loss of Anakin Skywalker, because we still don't know, and which I think this series will explain it. Does he believe that Anakin still died on Mustafar, or does he know that Anakin has become Vader? I mean, he knows the name Vader, right? Because
he knows he's Vader.
Right, he does know he's Vader. So if he hears about this black suit person named Darth Vader, I'm assuming he would know that that's Anakin. But at what point does he find that out? I think a flashback to some scene, some Clone Wars battle, or them just, I think that would be incredible. And if you think about it, again, there's the rumor when Rosario Dawson was kind of getting cast for this role of Ahsoka, live action Ahsoka. One of the rumors attached to that was that she was signed on for multiple series, right? I mean, could she then show up in a flashback as well?
Well, I don't think she'd be in a flashback. I don't think she can pull off a 16, 17-year-old girl. That's a lot of de-aging.
Yeah, you'd have to de-age her, a
Body
little bit,
double,
probably.
Get a shorter person.
Yeah, that's true.
But definitely current. No reason why.
But I don't know, because Anakin and Obi-Wan are 20 years older than what they were.
Yeah, but you're talking 17 versus late 30s.
True.
Put a Jedi hood on her, and dim lighting.
You never know. Yeah.
Captain America, they can do it here, I guess. No, I think Ahsoka could definitely be in a current timeline for an Obi-Wan show. I mean, again, no telling what Obi-Wan does. He can go off planet, or Ahsoka can go to Tatooine for quick R&R. So who knows?
Well, Ahsoka then can actually be in the present time.
Yeah.
Of Obi-Wan, right? So that would be see. And then they start talking about Anakin, and there's flashbacks.
Yeah, reminiscing.
I mean,
I remember. Yeah, just like he just talk about Clone Wars stories.
Yeah. And then, of course, the last casting one we'll talk about real fast is the possible return of Boba Fett, with the rumored casting of Tamara Morrison, who played Jango Fett in And All the Clones, technically, in episodes 2 and 3. Of course, he's now the voice of Boba Fett. They replaced his voice in the films Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Actually, I don't think he speaks in Return of the Jedi, right? I don't think he speaks in Return of the Jedi. So what do you think about... Now, our big topic for this episode, once we get through all this news, I do want to get some just initial thoughts on where you possibly even think Season 2 is going in The Mandalorian, now that we're hearing all of these casting rumors and possible characters that show up. But... are you surprised now? Because I feel like I'm a little surprised about the announcement of Boba Fett, just simply on the fact that we were told that they weren't allowed to bring Boba Fett into this series. Or the Mandalorian couldn't be about Boba Fett in a sense.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this came out of left field, I feel like, for me.
Well, I'm still holding it with a grain of salt.
True.
Just because.
Not rumored.
Because it was almost like a too good to be true kind of story where it's like, he's in season two, and that was him in that 5th episode of season 1, where it's okay.
Right.
So he must have just gotten his armor back, according to what happens in Aftermath, where he apparently loses his armor for a while, which rightfully he would get it back, I'm sure. I mean, I don't mind at all that he's in season 2 as either a mentor type person or even a villain to Mando. I mean, I really don't see a problem with that. I mean, clearly they're not worried about bringing in characters that could take the spotlight away from Mando, because that's season 1 was spotlight was pretty much all on mostly the characters, especially Baby Yoda.
Yeah. Right.
So this season, I mean, spotlight would definitely be on Boba Fett and Ahsoka if she's in 1 or more episodes. Sabine, Rex, if he shows up too. So who knows what will happen. And then this guy, so this one place who's been kind of doing all these rumors about not just Boba Fett, but other like Sabine, that kind of stuff, also says, I think Boba Fett could be an even bigger role in season 3 of Mandalorian. That's kind of a recent rumor I read just before I got on here and start recording. But I'm not bothered by it whatsoever. I mean, I'm reading online, people are just thinking that it's out of, like Cody said, like out of left field, but with a much more negative and spiteful language behind it. So it's like Obi-Wan coming back. This is, to me, Boba Fett is the other character that fans have been screaming to come back.
Yeah, because
he didn't get the story that he deserved, and he has such a cult following. So, why would this? How could this? I mean, I can know how it could be a bad thing if they could just bring him in poorly, but why would this be a bad thing? Why should it be a bad thing? I mean, I feel like everybody wants this to happen, so I'm totally on board with it.
Yeah, we finally get hopefully the canon, how he survived the Sarlacc. I mean, if it's actually going to be true, we know he survived. Sure. So, yeah, it's going to be awesome. And I know he's not a Mandalorian, technically, but he's the OG Mandalorian, back in the day when there was only one. Mm-hmm. And he is like the man with no name kind of thing. I mean, he's got a name, but so it almost kind of feels like it's going to be the showdown with him and Mando, whether or not he's going after Mando or Baby Yoda. I almost think he's got to be a villain, but I like your idea of him becoming a mentor potentially, starts as a foe or something. Yeah. I don't know. Well, the fact that if he was in episode 5, because the spurs are only associated with like Boba Fett, and maybe they use it for Mando and Mandalorian, then he's with Fennec Shand. Or somehow he's got her. So you assume maybe they're working together. Fennec's obviously going to want revenge on Mando. So you almost think that he's already aligned as a villain coming into this thing, which would be awesome.
Yeah, I think that it's possible also, again, without confirmation, that we could be jumping the gun a little bit, because maybe it's true that somebody found out that Tamara Morrison was cast. Because the other side of this is he does play clones. Yep. So could this be actually Captain Rex that's cast, not necessarily Boba Fett? Of course, with the news that Sabine Wren's coming and Ahsoka's coming, it's like that would make more sense that it's actually Captain Rex, right? Because we don't know. We didn't see anything fatefully happen to him in Rebels, and it's kind of said in the epilogue that he fought in the Battle of Endor.
Yeah.
So he's still around, and at least we think he is 5 years after Endor. But I think I think it's possible. Of course, people are speculating that he could be playing double duty, doing both. But which would be fine, I guess, if you separate the episodes, right? So I guess that could be possible, and it could be that he's going to be part of maybe, if there is a spin-off show with Sabine and Ahsoka or something like that. I don't know. It'd be great to see them live action.
I just got like an image of the reveal. It's like think of like Thor meets the Guardians. Like I think it's like Mando meets the Ghost Crew, where he gets taken up. He's like, "Who are you guys?" And it's like Ahsoka and Sabine and Rex.
That's true. Hey, but I do think what should happen. I think this is just me being a fan. But if they do bring Boba Fett back, if they do bring Tamara Morrison and he plays Boba Fett, and they explain, like you said, how he gets out of the Sarlacc, and they're setting up for a possible, more stories with Boba Fett, I truly think it would make sense then to rewind time with, Obi-Wan or Cassian and get, Daniel Logan back and play a Boba Fett in that era. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That would be really cool. Just think of that. Just think of seeing what we saw in animatics. The Cad Bane Boba Fett throwdown in live action. Just saying. That would be.
Who's to say Cad Bane couldn't be in The Mandalorian?
Yeah.
That's who I actually first thought it was with the spurs, because he does have spurs also. I threw out right away on the Mandalore podcast. I was like, yeah, think it could be Cad Bane because it sounded like he has the big trench coat, you know, that kind of looked like it. So, yeah, I was hoping it was Cad Bane. That would be awesome. And that makes total sense too with Filoni, you know, bringing his characters back in. So, so that's the casting news. So before we get into a little more Mandalorian, got to talk about kind of this finale of Clone Wars. Like you said, Cody, in the beginning of this episode here, we got the finale on May the 4th. In fact, it came out on midnight, so I watched it right at midnight. I don't know if you guys were aware of that.
Nice.
Yeah. Usually dropped at like 3 in the morning on East Coast time, but I checked at like 12:30 and it was already up. So I had watched it that night first because I saw all these tweets coming like, "Oh, it's dropped early! It's dropped early!" Everybody's watching it. So, well, I'll give you my thing here in a minute. But what did Case talk about? Kind of how it ended for you and kind of the overall, you know, Siege of Mandalore arc.
You know, I feel like I really can only talk about it as a whole arc, as like a whole movie, because that's you just hear everybody, part of the cast and crew, talk about how that's really how they intended it to be. The whole arc was amazing. It was just a thrilling ride. You know, if you're thinking of it all as one, it's just so thrilling from beginning to end. And the 2 middle episodes were just so gripping and so amazing. This last episode was probably my least favorite of the arc, just because, you know, it's pretty much started with a climax, and then the whole rest of it was the end, was the resolution, because it was mostly action, and then like 5 to 7 minutes of just no dialogue and just emotional, beautiful shots. So it felt like that last, you know, 20, 30 minutes of a movie. So it was a perfect way to, I think it was a perfect way to end that arc. It's hard to say it's a perfect way to end the show, because I don't want the show to ever end, but it was a great way to kind of sign off Ahsoka, at least this part of Ahsoka and Rex's journey, and perfectly goes into that next era of Star Wars. And, you know, it had to have ended sad, just because that's how this era of Star Wars ends. It, with Revenge of the Sith, it ends with the bad guys winning. So there's no other way this arc would have been able to end, you know. Yeah. So it's fitting. It makes total sense. It fits everything that's happening with the other stories around this time. And again, I think it leads so perfectly into the Ahsoka novel, which leads into the Rebels, which leads into the Rogue One and A New Hope and original. So it all just, I think, to me at least, in my opinion, seamlessly runs together. You know, it's just a part of the great, you know, continuity for me of all these stories and the different mediums, you know, which is great as throwing my cable here. It's just great as a fan to just consume all the platforms. It's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with everything you said. I think when you see it as a whole arc and almost as a movie, and it'd almost be good to take a beat and then go back and watch the whole thing now that it's all out, because it is so cinematic. You know, you've got these almost like really high highs, these big action packed moments that we saw in the previous one during Order 66, and, you know, like you said, the beginning of this episode, and then the Ahsoka Maul fight. But then you've also got, you know, kind of sandwiched in between these really emotional moments, and a lot of it is with Ahsoka, but a lot of it in the last two comes between Ahsoka and Rex, which I thought was really cool. And you almost kind of see where Filoni's bringing some of what he's either potentially done in Mandalorian or learned along the way from being on set, because I know he was visiting set for, you know, Rogue One and Last Jedi and things like that. But that moment with Ahsoka and Rex is honestly probably one of my favorites. You know, it's like Rex is almost kind of, you know, talking about his clones as brothers and saying like they're willing to kill us. You know, they're not going to stop. You know, the ship's going to go down or whatever. And then Ahsoka coming in and being like, that might be the case, but I'm not going to be the one to kill them. And you're like,
Right.
oh man, that's inspiring. That's hopeful. That's,
That's
taking
a Jedi.
yeah, that's a Jedi. It's taking the tougher road to do the right thing. And that really just encompasses a lot of what Clone Wars is and about and Star Wars for me. So I loved it. And the ending, I mean, gosh, Vader, just the stark, the beautiful painting, but that stark and just, you mentioned it, Case, it's somber and so quiet.
Yeah, the music
and it
is
really
incredible.
down a little bit, but it is that impending doom, like when we saw episode 3, you know what's coming, but you don't know how you got there.
So would you have, or would you both, if let's just say when Disney made the acquisition, they didn't, cancel Clone Wars and it just continued on. I mean, did it end up ending? If they would have even run this years ago when they were getting into season 7, I mean, is this how you had envisioned, and whether or not you are satisfied truly with the ending, the end scene, how the last shot, just did that feel like the ending of this series to you? Case.
I mean, if as the show is ending, we didn't know it was ending, but no, because I never really picked up on it or really considered it to be an Ahsoka Rex show until just recently, really. Until like the last couple of years, probably 2-3 years, through Rebels and just through bringing Ahsoka back and all the discussions around Ahsoka, and then hearing about how Clone Wars was cut short because it was supposed to be Ahsoka and Rex's story. Then I'm rethinking those, that series. So no, I mean, through the conversation, through interviews you've read about Dave Filoni saying how he always wanted it, and I remember him saying this the first time about talking about how he wished he had planned for it to overlap Revenge of the Sith. So I had always kind of, I guess in the back of my mind, thought it would end with Order 66, but I guess I was always assuming it would be Anakin and Obi-Wan would be more involved somehow, meaning we would probably see maybe a little bit afterwards. We would see a little bit more Vader and Obi-Wan further than what we saw in Revenge of the Sith, or just kind of with Ahsoka thrown in there. So not quite how I imagined the ending would go, but basically ending the same way, ending with this just a downer. It's Order 66. So
yeah,
that's pretty much how I thought it would go, but definitely not the gut punches with Maul at all. I never thought Maul would be a part of it. That's really the biggest thing that I never saw, because I don't think we learned of a Siege of Mandalore until Rebels, and the Ahsoka novel kind of introduced that, at least to, I think, us, the wider, the mass, audience. So quite different.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see a lot of the ending coming the way it did. I think chronologically, I'm a little unsure about where the Netflix season ended, but Ahsoka's story, when she left the Order, that was a fitting in for Ahsoka in my mind back when we were watching it. And then they had a couple other episodes that came out that weren't really chronologically in the right place, but to me that always allowed me to dream up, well, where is Ahsoka? Why isn't she a part of some of these other things we've seen, or what's going to happen? And then Rebels came around and helped explain some of that and brought her back, and it was really cool. But now looking back on it, I'm glad obviously they finished it the way they did. I think it would have set up. I'd love to watch it, like a young kid will. You watch Clone Wars, you end it, and you're like, well, what's going to happen with Ahsoka and Rex? And then you see them again in Rebels, and I think that'll be a really cool bridge, as opposed to where we got it. It was like, well, we knew Ahsoka lived, but this really gives you the Rex and the clone portion of it, which was great.
Yeah, I think that when I had visions of how this thing was going to end while we were watching, season after season as they were coming out, I thought it would. I actually had no reservations that it was actually going to show Order 66. I thought it was going to just kind of lead right up to them leaving to go help the Chancellor. Kind of what we saw. But not, the whole Siege of Mandalore, I'd never never anticipated that, obviously, because when you first watch season 1 and 2, you never think Maul's even coming back. That whole thing was a kind of just a crazy reintroduction of this character, resurrection of this character. So that was a big surprise. And I think in the end, though, Ahsoka became such a popular character that I think it naturally shaped into her series. Rex obviously became a big part of that as well. But and as I watched back some of the older episodes, there are a lot of Rex with his clones and his camaraderie with his brothers and how much. So you do get that feeling and understand what he's talking about when he, it was the second to last episode. That conversation is the one I really love with Ahsoka, where Ahsoka's talking about, we were supposed to be keepers of the peace, not soldiers, but all I know is how to be a soldier. Ever since I've been a Padawan, that's all I've been. And then Rex, of course, saying, we got mixed feelings about this war. Some of us think that we shouldn't be doing it, but some of us know that we wouldn't exist without it, right? So it's a great conversation. I felt like, and then, of course, they end with saying how good of friends they are. And of course, that's where the devastation happens when he gets the order to execute her. But, it's funny. After the second or third time I watched it, the ending where we see Vader, and I did, of course, Disney Plus has it. I went to season 2 of Rebels, and I replayed that scene where she sees Rex again. And I'm telling you, when she sees him and she hugs him, you can feel the appreciation and the love that she has for Rex right there. And now that we know the history of what they went through, that last time they apparently saw each other, they both said, and Rex even whispers to her, like, "I'm glad you're still alive." It's like they went their separate ways at some point, and they didn't know whether or not anything had happened to him. Now, of course, Ahsoka somehow knows that where he is, and we still need to get that story, I think, of how Wolf and Gregor still don't have their chips, how they got their chips removed and whatnot. And I think we will at some point get that story. But I don't know. Do you guys, just kind of quick side note, do you guys feel indifferent at all about the changes of Siege of Mandalore compared to what is described in the novel? And what ends up being now, which is pretty much canon now. And then, of course, because a part of that is in that novel, there's no, in the novel, there's no explanation of the chip being removed. And then in Rebels, when Rex is talking to the Ghost Crew, he mentions how he removed the chip, they removed the chip out of them before they were able to execute Order 66 or whatever. So anything difference about that? Any feelings about that?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I mean, I can easily move past it. It's not earth shattering for me. I think because there were like several other little, minor differences as well. The biggest thing, is the Rex, I guess continuity issue, but I like how it happened in Clone Wars. That's kind of how it was. I totally forgot how it happened in Ahsoka, and I kept meaning to reread it, but I'm glad I didn't, because I would have gone it. I mean, it didn't happen the same way, I would have kind of felt like I'd been ruined even more so on what could have happened. But I was really hoping that Rex hadn't had removed the chip. That he would have had this dramatic battle. Even though we got a little bit of that right when he was kind of turned on to Order 66, but I was really hoping for that kind of drama and that kind of conflict. So I'm glad we got it, and I prefer that over than him just maybe it might have been funny if you just pretended to go along with it to save Ahsoka and then be like, no, I removed it, months ago or something like that. But I'm fine with it. It's really, it's just these other things in Star Wars. You either just accept it and move on, or you let it haunt you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I feel like from a certain point of view, it could be almost construed. Rex saying, "Oh, I got my chip removed," or I don't know what the actual line verbatim is, but even that idea of I went and got a haircut. Well, I didn't cut my own hair. I did actually this time quarantine, but generally someone else cuts my hair. But I don't say that so and so cut my hair. Like Ahsoka removed my chip. He even resisted and told her about Fives. So you could almost say that he is the reason why his chip got removed. Like there's always little ways to explain it away. So it doesn't take away from me, mostly because the arc is so great. Right. And I do like the version that they put out in the Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. Like you were saying, more than if he had just removed it off screen.
Yeah. It's just like, again, like those story group kind of canon things. It's like, you weren't there. How do you know? It's like
exactly. Yeah.
All you know is that he had it and he didn't have it, and then they survived. Who's to say who took it out?
How it came out is not relevant.
Don't worry about that.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Okay, so wrapping it up then totally is do you feel at all that we didn't get the whole story of the Clone Wars? I mean, do you feel like this is a complete series now that he was able to go back and put out these last 12 episodes, though? Do you still feel like it's incomplete, or do you feel like it is a complete series now? Like if someone sat down and got introduced to this thing and just watched it 1 through 7 now, would you feel like that whole story is there?
I'll tell you what, actually, is my biggest problem with the whole Clone Wars idea is that we never got the start, the start of the Clone Wars. We got, Attack of the Clones, but right after that, like every time we get the micro series, the 2D micro series did it great, because you got, I feel like, more of a, even though it was only short, it was very shortly lived, but you kind of got the early days of the Clone Wars, whereas this show picks up, I feel like, sometime after, mainly because of, I'm looking at Anakin's appearance. You don't get the moments of the Clone Wars where he's still in the Padawan kind of stage. I might have think that he quickly got a haircut and kind of went to that next level and went, maybe, but it's just, I want to know the days after the Battle of Geonosis. I want to know what was the next, like there had to have been, I feel like, just chaotic like meetings of the Republic, like, oh my gosh, we're in this war now, what are we going to do? Do we want to do this war? Do we want to, it's like there had been those conversations, those quick early moral conversations about, we're in the smack dab in the middle of this huge war all of a sudden. What are we going to do? Are we going to, in this random Clone War army that came out of nowhere, are we going to investigate it, or are we just going to accept it? And, it's like all these questions, like that to me is a huge hole in the Clone Wars story that needs to be told. And as far as I know, no one's talked about it. No, Filoni's never talked about that. There's been no story group conversations about that. I don't know, maybe there has, but I haven't read any. So I hate to say that is my biggest problem, but I'm fine. If we never get it, that's fine. I think it's a good story to be told, because the prequels is such a era of a lot of Star Wars is, obviously, but especially the prequels, it's such a moral compass kind of era where it's, like you said, we're not soldiers, we're peacekeepers. Okay, well then what do you do when you're confronted with this huge moral dilemma of, like, you're almost forced to being a soldier? Do you stick to those beliefs, or do you compromise those beliefs?
Yeah.
We obviously know what happens, but were there ever those conversations, at least in that battle of the Jedi? Do the Jedi become generals, or do they fight it a little bit and then ultimately become generals? And do they feel bad about it? So, yeah, I want that. I want those stories. But other than that, the other arcs that we know of, Filoni hadn't finished. I definitely want the Cad Bane Boba Fett arc. I definitely want to see that.
Cody?
It's a good point about the time gap. I actually hadn't considered it being a hole in the canon as much until you mentioned it. The young, naive Anakin. But I'll say for the Clone Wars animated series, I would say if it's a story about Ahsoka and about Ahsoka and Anakin specifically, it starts the minute that she gets there and takes us all the way to the end of when she leaves and when, Anakin is now Vader. So I would say if somebody asked, and is it complete? Do I feel like it's complete? Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's Filoni and, partially George's story, how they wanted to tell it. But I'm super interested in seeing some of those younger Anakin and Obi-Wan stories now that you mention it. And of course the Boba Fett arc. The Utapau arc, I already watched it all in animatic. It wasn't that great, to be totally honest.
Yeah, I think they should I think they should somehow release those stories in either comic form, book form. You could do an animated movie still and do something like along those lines. But no, I think I 100% agree with you, Casey. I think that there is a setup that I felt like was kind of breezed over and glossed over in episode 2, where the Battle of Geonosis broke out, and all of a sudden, for some reason, these clones were, I guess they were listening to Jedi because that's how they were programmed.
Probably.
Because a Jedi made the order. Because you're right. At what point was that discussion made between the council to say that? I mean, who in the whole Jedi training, from a youngling to a Padawan to a knight, that you enlist as a general, lead an army. I mean, there's no training for that as far as we know. But all of a sudden, the Jedi are generals leading battalions and legions of of clone troopers.
Yeah.
So
couldn't be far enough away from what they tried to teach and believe. It's like that is a huge 180 for a Jedi.
And did it come from? Did it come from them, or like you said, did it come from Palpatine? Pushing this on them as part of the plan,
right?
So that is interesting, and I feel like even though the movie is the first thing that came out, we know that technically in chronological order, there were 2 episodes prior to the movie, which was the Battle of Christophsis. But you're right, at the beginning of that, in the setup of that battle, it just seems like the Clone Wars have been waging for several months. I would feel like it's almost like 4 or 5 months, maybe, based on Anakin's look and based on the establishment of these battles throughout the galaxy. So I think there is a little bit of a setup there that we didn't get, and it does make sense that since it is about Ahsoka, that we see her from when we get the series from when we see her to whenever she leaves. But it actually would have made a little bit more sense if you would have started it like shortly after episode 2, leading into episode 3, right? I mean, that whole series that way. But
there should be a sequel novel to Master and Apprentice, and it's about Anakin and Obi-Wan at the early days of the Clone Wars. That should be and then the 3rd book should be Luke and Ben. I'm just saying, just throwing that out there.
There you go. Yeah,
I love it.
Claudia Gray, you can do that. It's okay.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't cost you anything. Just take that and run with it.
Yeah, just please.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Take the burden from me. Just do that.
Yeah. Casey doesn't want to be famous or anything. So
I can't. I just been. Yeah. Sorry.
No, but I think overall, look, I'm just ecstatic that we got more Clone Wars episodes. I just never thought we were ever going to get it, and I'm glad they were able to at least put out. No matter how you feel about Bad Batch, or the Martez sisters, the Siege of Mandalore. If you would have just gave me that, I would have been actually okay, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
incredible ending to the Clone Wars. I think I actually did a YouTube search real fast. I still don't see anybody that has actually mashed them together yet
The
as a
movie?
full movie. Yeah.
I definitely want a supercut, and
I
of like
definitely.
Revenge of the Sith and the arc. Yeah,
I haven't watched it yet, but there is a. It looks like there's a minute 55 video that says the Siege of Mandalore plus Revenge of the Sith supercut announcement. So I guess this channel is doing it. They just haven't done it yet. But there will be some supercuts out there that'll be fun to watch or whatever. So.
I mean, just the fact that the scene of Mace and the Jedi talking at the holo table there, and how they just perfectly to the frame, to the movement, recreated Ki-Adi-Mundi's movement. They used the audio and the framing of the other shots in that scene match Revenge of the Sith so well. Like that is flawless and perfect, and you have to watch this in sync with the movie just because it fits so perfectly.
Yes.
Like, oh, hey, Ahsoka.
Yeah. Oh,
you just missed Revenge of the Sith.
Really? Yeah.
Much.
Yeah.
I know. Rex did too, right?
Like,
because he was in.
Yeah.
He was in the previous scene. Before he sends Anakin the news, Rex had just left.
Yeah.
So
they can just digitally add them in. It's super easy.
I know.
The Star Wars Revisited guy needs to do Revenge of the Sith, and then
that's right.
Have them walking away, when the scene starts and ends.
Yeah, that's it. All right. That we're kind of gone a little longer, so we'll actually push next week. We'll dive a little bit more into the whole concept that I was gonna kind of throw out to you guys, which is the season 2 Mandalorian. That's actually going to be a bigger conversation, I feel like. So let's table that till next week, and we'll get us back on here and kind of speculate on where we think actually season 2 is going to be going, based on these rumors, based on these directors that have been, and then we'll talk about that as well next week. So that will do it for this episode. Great talk about the Clone Wars there, finale. I think we're all in agreement that it was truly, I mean, the bottom line is to me that was completely epic storytelling from everybody involved. That last arc with, I mean, episodes 10 and 11 were by far the best things I've seen in Star Wars.
I mean, we've said it here tonight, but it's like Filoni and the team did something for me that I think is rare to happen in this kind of scenario where, like, we know how essentially it's going to end. We know it's Order 66. We know Ahsoka and Rex live. We basically know the big major beats, and Maul lives, but still, like, the whole journey of this arc, I was, the little beats throughout each episode, or just the emotional moments and the action and the intensity and the performances, like, it still caught you off by surprise. Like, even though it's going to happen, I was still on the edge of my seat, emotional, when really I haven't even gotten that emotional during the course of this series. I feel like I've never been able to quite connect that way to the show, to that level, unfortunately, but this arc did that for me. And it's to me, that just proves in my own, like, ranking, like, this is the best, some of the best Star Wars storytelling.
Any last thoughts, Cody?
Yeah, I mean, I just think Filoni very obviously is showing that he has skills, storytelling wise, that can almost transcend just the medium that he has most of experience in. And, now we're seeing him get more opportunities. So, I'm just really interested to see what else he has in store, and how much Lucasfilm will give him and trust him moving forward. Because I think it just shows that Star Wars, has a bright future, and it still has a little bit of that connection to what we grew up with, and still a little bit of ties to George and George's Star Wars, which is ultimately what got us all interested in it. So.
That's great. I think Clone Wars has come to a great end, and I think there's going to be a long history that Filoni will develop out of this going forward, of being involved in Star Wars storytelling. I think there's no doubt about that. So, thanks everybody for checking us out and listening. We will be back next week to, like I said, talk about a little bit more of The Mandalorian and kind of speculate about that. And, of course, go over and discuss whatever other rumors drop this week. I wanted to mention, because this is actually the first time we kind of recorded since, but we started a new little series on our YouTube channel called Council Sessions, where we're going to be kind of having two-person, one-on-one kind of conversations on certain topics. Casey and I did our first 2 episodes that we dropped last week on May the 4th. Who is the greatest Jedi? I'd be interested to get your take on this, Cody, at some point. And then, of course, when did the Jedi fall? Which ties into a lot of what we're talking about earlier with Qui-Gon and Anakin and whatnot. So go check those out. Those are on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Inside the Force. We'll be doing those pretty regularly here. Got to get Cody involved in one of those. I actually got a good topic for you, Cody, to talk about. So we'll get that going soon. Go check that out and go to InsideTheForce.com to subscribe to our YouTube channel and all of the podcast streams on your favorite podcast listening network. So thanks, guys, for coming on. Cody, Casey?
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Good to see you all.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. See you next week. May the Force be with you.